The corridor behind the Combat Readiness Facility always felt different after hours. During the day, it was alive with movement, boots pounding, radios crackling, instructors shouting over the sound of steel lockers slamming shut. But at night, when most personnel drifted toward the barracks or the mess hall, the hallway fell into a strange kind of stillness. It hummed quietly, filled only with the mechanical rhythm of vents pushing recycled air and the soft buzz of fluorescent lights that flickered just enough to make every shadow look like it was thinking. Lieutenant Commander Avery Holt stood at the far end of that corridor, clipboard in hand, meticulously checking the inventory list for the next morning's combat drills. She was alone, which wasn't unusual. She preferred working when the noise died down, when the facility's rough edges softened and the mission felt clear again. Avery wasn't the kind to seek attention or command a room with volume. She led by presence, silent, unwavering, steady as reinforced steel. Her olive-green shirt clung to her shoulders with the faint dampness of a long day. A few strands of her dark hair had slipped loose from her bun, brushing against her jaw. She brushed them back absently as she marked another line on the clipboard. The metallic scent of weapons oil lingered in the air, mixing with the colder smell of concrete and steel racks. Somewhere deeper in the building, a gear locker rattled shut, echoing down the length of the hallway like a hollow warning. Avery didn't react. She continued writing, numbers flowing smoothly under her pen. Then she heard boots, heavy ones, unhurried, confident. She didn't look up immediately. She had heard enough footsteps in her life to know the difference between someone passing through and someone approaching with purpose. These belonged to the second category. When she finally raised her head, she saw them. 3 Marines walking toward her with the swagger of men who had convinced themselves that the rules bent in their direction. Corporal Blake Mercer led the way, shoulders squared, jaw clenched, chin lifted in a way that wasn't confidence so much as territorial instinct. He was the type who mastered just enough of his training to believe no one could tell him what to do. Behind him walked Lance Corporal Cade, silent and easy to miss except for the glint of something mean in his eyes. Cade moved like a shadow, sliding behind, waiting for openings, feeding off the strength of louder men. Private Ryder Kincaid brought up the rear, his lips curled into a half-grin that never reached his eyes. He swung a dull-edged training blade casually in one hand, tapping it against his thigh like a toy he hadn't been told to put away. When the 3 reached Avery, the corridor seemed to tighten around them. Mercer stepped directly into her path. Cade shifted behind her. Kincaid twirled the blade once, letting it catch the flickering light. The message was clear. They had chosen their moment. Late evening, empty corridor, no witnesses. Ryder was the first to break the silence. With a lazy flick of his wrist, he pointed the training blade toward Avery's shoulder, tracing it slowly down the seam of her shirt. Not deep enough to hurt, just enough to humiliate. "Well," he murmured, voice low and dripping with mock amusement, "looks like someone thinks she belongs back here." A snicker rose from Cade. Mercer's jaw twitched in satisfaction. Avery didn't step back. She didn't shift her weight. She didn't let the blade's cold edge register on her face. Instead, she lifted her eyes from the clipboard and fixed them on Mercer, the one clearly leading this show of dominance. Her expression didn't harden, it didn't soften, it simply settled into something precise, focused, controlled. "Step back," she said. Her tone wasn't loud, it wasn't strained, it was steady, so steady that it almost didn't match the situation at all. But steadiness, for Avery Holt, had never been a lack of fear. It was discipline carved into her bones by years of training, by missions where panic killed and composure kept men breathing. The Marines didn't move. If anything, Mercer leaned closer, as if her calm irritated him in ways he couldn't name. Ryder's grin widened, Cade's eyes narrowed, and there they stood, 3 men trying to claim a hallway as their territory, and 1 woman who refused to give them even an inch. The hum of fluorescent lights buzzed louder overhead. The corridor stretched silent and cold around them, and the air shifted, thickening with something dangerous. For a long moment, no one moved. The corridor seemed to hold its breath, as if the entire building was listening, waiting to see who would act first. Lieutenant Commander Avery Holt lowered her clipboard just enough to free her hands. It was a small motion, barely noticeable, but the kind of controlled shift that signaled she was no longer focused on her paperwork. She was calculating, anticipating, preparing. Corporal Blake Mercer didn't like it. His jaw flexed once. He leaned in until he was close enough that Avery could smell the faint mix of energy drink and sweat on his breath. His boots planted wider, claiming more of the corridor, as if her stillness required him to prove something. "You giving orders now?" he asked, voice thick with mock authority. Avery didn't blink. "I said step back." The words felt heavier this time, not louder, never louder, but weighted with something that didn't match the quiet posture of the woman standing before them. A line drawn, a boundary set, a warning unspoken. Ryder Kincaid snorted behind her, tapping the training blade against his palm. "Hear that, Mercer? Lieutenant Commander thinks this hall belongs to her." Lance Corporal Cade circled a little closer, cutting off any retreat she might have used. Not that Avery had any intention of retreating. Cade's eyes were sharp, watching her hands, her posture, the subtle tension in her shoulders. He was quieter than the others, and quiet men had a different kind of danger to them. Mercer drew himself up even straighter, blocking the overhead light. His shadow stretched across Avery's chest. "You don't belong in our section," he muttered. "Everyone knows it. Command just show." Avery interrupted him without raising her voice. "Move." The simplicity of it cut through the corridor like a blade. Something ugly flashed across Mercer's face, a twist of irritation, disbelief, and fragile pride. He wasn't used to defiance, especially not from someone who didn't meet aggression with fear. Cade exhaled, a sound between amusement and readiness. Ryder tightened his grip on the training blade, not understanding yet that he was handling something far out of his depth. Mercer took one deliberate step forward. Avery didn't move, didn't even tilt her chin up. She simply held his gaze with an expression so controlled it made him falter for half a second. Just half. But Avery saw it. She saw the hesitation behind his bravado, the flicker of uncertainty that always lived inside men who acted tough because silence frightened them. She saw the insecurity under his posture, the smallness behind his loudness. "You think rank's gonna save you?" Mercer hissed. Avery didn't answer. She didn't need to. Silence in her hands was sharper than any retort. Ryder, unable to stand being ignored, slid the dull blade toward her side again. "Maybe we should teach her where she stands." Cade lifted a hand, Ryder enough, but Ryder's grin said he wasn't stopping. He pressed the blade lightly to her ribcage. Avery's breath never changed. What the Marines didn't know, what they had absolutely no way of knowing, was that the woman standing before them had spent years operating in environments where a real blade, not a training toy, had been pressed to her throat by men much more disciplined than Ryder Kincaid. Men she'd disarmed in under 3 seconds, men she'd walked away from, men who didn't. But Avery wasn't here to hurt Marines, not unless she had no other choice. Mercer's voice dropped to a growl. "Say it again." He taunted. "Tell me to step back." She did step back. The corridor vibrated with the force of the tension, every sound, the flicker of lights, the hum of vents, Ryder's breathing, seemed amplified. Mercer scoffed. The first crack in his composure. "You're in the wrong place, Holt." her eyes locked on his, calm, unflinching. "You're out of line, Corporal." Cade shifted, uncertain now. Ryder rolled his neck, eager. "Let's end this." And then the atmosphere changed, not slowly, not gradually, but instantly. A sound echoed from somewhere down the hall, a metallic clang, a door opening, someone approaching. The Marines stiffened, instinctively straightening their posture, but not stepping back. Their pride wouldn't let them. Avery remained exactly where she was, hands relaxed at her sides, posture measured. If someone rounded the corner now, they would see a single woman surrounded by 3 Marines, a blade in play, and tension coiled tight enough to snap. But Avery didn't turn toward the sound. Her eyes stayed on Mercer. Her voice stayed steady. Her warning stayed clear. "You have 3 seconds," she said quietly. "Step back now, or you will regret not doing it." It wasn't a threat. It was a promise, and the corridor knew it. The sound of footsteps echoed from deeper in the building. Slow, steady, getting closer. The kind of steps that belonged to someone who had authority, someone who belonged in these halls. The Marines heard it. Avery heard it. The corridor itself seemed to freeze, but no one moved. Corporal Mercer's nostrils flared. A storm of pride and resentment flickered across his expression. He was caught between backing down and pushing forward. Backing down would bruise the ego he guarded like armor. Pushing forward would mean challenging a lieutenant commander outright. Ryder Kincaid still held the dull training blade pressed against Avery's ribs. The metal was cold, but his hand had begun to sweat, slicking the hilt. He didn't see reality. He only saw bravado, a chance to impress the wrong people. Lance Corporal Cade shifted again, his gaze flicking between the approach of the footsteps and Avery's maddening stillness. Cade wasn't a fool. He felt something the others didn't, a wrongness in the air, a sense that they had cornered the wrong person. But peer pressure was a powerful thing, and Mercer's shadow was hard to step out of. Avery didn't turn toward the approaching footsteps. She didn't break her focus. Her eyes stayed locked on Mercer, calm, quiet, unshaken. "You have 3 seconds," she repeated. "Step back." Mercer clenched his jaw. "You don't tell me." 1. Her voice was cold steel, no tremor, no hesitation. Ryder smirked, misreading everything. "She's bluffing." Cade swallowed. 2. This time the word echoed harder, not louder, but heavier, as though the corridor itself tightened in anticipation. Mercer took in a sharp breath, ready to spit back another insult. He never got the chance. Before 3 even left Avery's lips, the entire atmosphere shifted. Her posture changed, not visibly, not dramatically, but with micro. Movements so precise they were almost invisible to the untrained eye. A subtle shift of weight, the tiniest rotation of her wrist, her heel adjusting just a centimeter. To Mercer, Ryder, and Cade, nothing seemed to happen, but something had, and what did happen happened fast. Avery moved, not explosively, not wildly, but surgically. Her hand snapped upward, catching Ryder's wrist in a grip so precise it locked the nerves instantly. She twisted, not enough to break yet, but enough to force the blade from his hand. It clattered to the floor, echoing throughout the corridor. Ryder howled, dropping to one knee as pain shot up his arm. Before he could recover, Avery pivoted, her elbow striking Cade squarely in the sternum. The breath left his lungs in a violent cough, and he stumbled backward into the wall, choking. Mercer reacted with shock, his instinct shifting from intimidation to defensive aggression. He reached out to grab her, but Avery had already stepped sideways. Her boot hooked behind his ankle in a perfectly timed sweep, sending him crashing backward. His spine hit the floor with a thud, knocking the air from his lungs. It had taken less than 3 seconds. All 3 Marines were down, but Avery wasn't done. She dropped to one knee beside Mercer, her face inches from his. Her voice was low, steady, and terrifyingly calm. You will never corner another officer again. You will never threaten someone under my command, and you will remember this moment every time you think your arrogance is stronger than discipline." Mercer's face twisted in humiliation and pain. He tried to speak, tried to defend himself, but all he managed was a ragged breath. The footsteps finally reached the corner of the corridor. From the glow of the flickering lights emerged Captain Rowan Hale, one of the most respected officers on base, a man whose voice carried weight because he rarely needed to raise it. He stopped mid-step, eyes widening as he took in the scene, Kincaid on one knee, clutching his wrist. Cade gasping for air against the wall, Mercer sprawled on the floor, stunned, and Avery Holt kneeling calmly beside him, posture clean and controlled. "What," Hale said slowly, "is going on here?" Ryder immediately pointed at Avery, breathless with indignation. She attacked us," Cade grunted, still trying to gather air. "Unprovoked, sir. She just—" Mercer pushed himself up on his elbows, face twisted with bitterness. "She assaulted Marines, Captain. Avery stood. She didn't defend herself. She didn't accuse them. Instead, she met Hale's eyes with unwavering clarity. 'They blocked my path, sir,' she said. They brandished a training blade, attempted physical intimidation, and refused multiple direct orders to step back. I responded within regulations to neutralize a threat." Her voice remained calm, controlled. "Professional." Captain Hale studied her expression, then looked at the Marines, 3 trained men who had been effortlessly dismantled in seconds. His jaw tightened. "Corporal Mercer." Hale said, voice edged with steel, "You and your men will report to my office immediately, then to medical, and then to disciplinary review." Ryder's face drained of color, Cade's shoulders slumped. Mercer stared at the floor, pride shattered. Hale turned to Avery. "Lieutenant Commander," he said quietly, "walk with me." As they left the corridor behind, Hale glanced sideways. "You didn't escalate, did you?" "No, sir," she replied. Hale nodded once. "Good, because they have no idea who they just tested." Avery didn't respond. She didn't need to. The corridor behind them buzzed with flickering lights, the echoes of 3 seconds that changed everything.